There were some really nice presentations from me. Class asked me to look at it from a pedagogical perspective, so I won't have these kind of fancy slides as you've seen right before here. So I'm trying to look at framing experiential learning and making. Try to look at the workshop as a pedagogical tool. Yes. Actually, a PowerPoint is the worst way of trying to get you to learn. Still, we are using it. This is the slide that I normally show when I teach structure. I teach structure courses in my school, and I ask my students to look at the picture very well, and also to you as well now, because I will ask some questions about it. It's important, I think, when we talk about experiences, to think about how do we experience an input, how we look at this. So I'll be asking some questions later about this picture. Yes, the next one. I just wanted to present myself a bit. My name is Laurens Luyten, if you call me Laurens. Next one. Like the class told you, I'm a civil engineer. This is my first calling, and then I did architecture, and also did work as an intern architect. And later on I did my PhD on the collaboration between engineers and architects. Yes, the next one. I've been working for about 17 to 18 years as a structural engineer. I did about 300 projects, and then I've been teaching now longer, since 1996, in structural courses, but also studio. And I've been doing research now, also pedagogical ones and on collaboration. Yes, next one. So I was able to do a lot of projects with many architects, which was very nice to see them and how they operate. Yes. Next one. And I've been teaching structures. I like to teach them because I'm very much interested in how I understand structures to convey that to other people without using the typical engineering formulas. Yes, next one. So let's go back to the first picture that you saw. I have some questions for you. Yeah, next one. How many tails were there on the airplane? How many of these did you see? Was it 0, 1, 2, 3? Normally I would do a poll with my students to check. Yeah, next one. Can I? Yeah, next. Yeah, so this is going wrong. I'll probably shout a bit louder. So in the back, when you stop hearing me, because I know my voice will drop when I talk a lot, you just give me a sign. So how many engines did you see on the airplane? Try to think about that. 1, 2, 0. That will be unlikely. Next one. Did you see a landing gear on the airplane? Next one. How many people were in the airplane? How many pilots, if you like? So this was a result, so you can check now how well did you perform. I know from my students, when I asked them, most of them got the wrong answers. And why do I show this? I like airplanes. I go to air shows. I know about airplanes. I train myself to recognize airplanes. And to do that, there are certain elements that are important. So I know this one is a distinctive feature. 2 engines is a distinctive feature. How many pilots are in there, and so on. These aerial rods, the small wings there, also typical features. So I learned how to use it. I have my own framework, so when I look at this picture, I have my experience and you had your experience. You used your own framework to experience that. And that's important. We're talking about how you experience things, and therefore you have to look at the framework that you're dealing with. Next one. We're not going to talk about airplanes, we're going to talk about making. These are projects that I was involved in. And we saw a lot of really nice ones. Next one. There are 2 parts in this lecture that I would like to share with you. And the first one is on the experiential learning in making, which is the largest part. And then I will also look at these learning goals that I investigated with a couple of colleagues. Yes? Okay. Yeah, normally I have the buttons to deal with that. I used the framework that Kolb is using, and he's saying, experiential learning is a process whereby knowledge is created through the transformation of experience. saying knowledge results from the combination of grasping and transforming experience. Yes, next one. He distinguishes 4 stages of learning. So the first one is the experience. It has to be very direct, like looking at the picture, and you need to also be involved in what you're doing or what you're experiencing. To be clear, this experience can be a mathematical problem that you're solving. It doesn't have to be multisensorial. It can be just any kind of experience. That's how he sees this theory. The next one is this reflective observation, where you try to understand what you just experienced and try to think about how could you have done things better, what actually happened. And the last, this one here, the abstract conceptualization, is about bringing it into the framework that I was talking about, the theoretical framework. What are the principles behind it? What are the laws that you could get out of the experience that you had? And that level can lead them to thinking about new experimentation, thinking about what I would like to know, which kind of principles do I think are there. Maybe I need to do another experiment or creating another experience, and that's how you make the cycle. Okay, next one. We are specifically looking at making, so we're looking at how making can create experiences, and we're looking at the theoretical framework on this part. Yes, next one. And that would mean that we're looking at what is this theoretical framework. This could be on construction, structure, comfort, social-cultural, sustainable, anything actually that you can find in an architectural or engineering program. Yes, next one. What I'm trying to present here is like a naive framework to look at making workshops where students are making things. So I just asked myself a couple of questions. And the first one is, what do you make? And we saw a lot of examples, so it can be easy. It's also a naive trial, or I try to make some kind of distinguishing. I don't know if model and prototype are the right words, but it's more important to think about characteristics. At what level is something producing a reality that you're looking at, or is it the full reality? Is it about a detail, a project, maybe something abstract? You have different kind of scale. Maybe the scale is not important. And you can use the original material of the thing that you modeled or a substitute. Yes, next one. I'll just go through a broad range of workshops that I did or was involved with, but you have seen already a lot of them. So this is the question for the student. It's often my projects are about structure, of course. You get 3 points where you can put support, and there's a load in the middle. You get some sticks and some ropes, make something so that it holds the load. So this is a very specific, more abstract. It doesn't relate to actually a reality. It's not modeling a reality. It's a more an abstract form. Yes, next one. So this one here is just, you have a square meter of cardboard, make a tower where you can sit on. To be clear, he broke his arm before the workshop. Next one. But you could also use it, this is made in cardboard, to understand how a structure, an existing structure is made, how it's function or how it's look like. Next one. You can also do that on the level of construction. How is a wall built? This is also with cardboard. Yes, next one. This is a project that students were, this was a larger design and build workshop where students were making something on site, so they made their model also with the material that they were going to use. Yes, next one. So this is the actual site they were making. So now we're entering the world of what I would call the prototype. You have the reality of how things are, and you're working, of course, on scale 1:1, and it's the original material. Yes. And so this is the finished product. But we've seen a lot of them today already. Next one. You could also do that on the detail, wondering how can you connect two wooden panels together. So this is a process of design. Yes, next one. It could be a smaller project, like a table in brick, where the rods are in there to pre-stress them. Yes, next one. Or they can be bigger, and we saw a lot of really nice one. This was done in March, I think, in Liechtenstein, with some colleague universities. Yes, one. Next one. Yes. So I don't know if this is a good division, but it's just to give you an idea about what is happening and what can you do and how, what are we looking at. Yes, next one. And then I thought, okay, we kind of know what they can make, but how did they get there? So how do you design it? This is also very primitive or naive way of describing a process of design. You start from some kind of concept idea, and you go through various cycles where you create, test, evaluate, and reflect to come to an object. If you look at this cycle, it's of course very much alike the cycle that's called presented in the learning cycle. So there, it's nice that it's similar. I use this just to explain a few things, a few characteristics. Next one. So you can look at from concept to object. You could do one cycle. You can do many cycles. Yes, next one. For example, these are structural engineers who are calculated an arch and then how to make for a brick arch, and they calculated the form and how much it could carry. So when they start making, they basically test what they have just calculated, and they can see, okay, the calculations fit with the actual world. This is one cycle in it if you look at it from the making point of view. Yeah, next one. So you can have many cycles or one. I think many is more interesting if you think about this idea of getting experiences and testing and moving on. Yes? For example, in this exercise, I specifically ask for 3 points and not 2 point support, because then you get bridges. And when you get bridges, they don't experiment, they don't try things. The students will actually look at how they see a bridge and they will copy the bridge. Here, the idea is that things fail and they have to adjust and they have to try to improve it. And there are maybe 2 or 3 typologic types that answer the real question, but I've never seen 2 projects really alike because they make their own process in making. Yes, next one. What else is there? I think if I talk about the abstract here, I talk about the things that you imagine, the things that you write on a paper, do on the computer. You try to figure it out, and the concrete is when it hits reality and you're using materials. So in this whole process, you can kind of shift this line. It could be like with the engineers, all abstract, and only at the end be concrete. Yes, next one. So for example here, which is a workshop that I really liked, is we asked students not to use paper, not to think about it, but just work with the material. So these were wooden panels, and they were looking at how to connect them. So they've used the material, try to figure out what can you do with it, how can you make a connection. That's what they came up with. And the material itself, for example, showed them how much they could apply it. They don't have to calculate it, just experience it, and they made their design based on that. Yes? So yeah, abstract and concrete. Next one. And then if you look at the workshop itself, where is it in the process? Sometimes a project, certainly a design build, can be a very big one. So you're not doing in one workshop everything. We saw that already today. So there is some part in it. I don't know what the next slide is. Can you, yeah, go back, please. So it can be very much in the beginning or the end. If you're, for example, looking at things that you want to learn about how to construct, then it's more interesting to be with the material, with the concrete one, and have the workshop in that area. If it's maybe more about how to design, how to think about design with materials, you certainly want to be more in the beginning. So it's coming back to the question, what are you actually learning? And that's why I'm also looking into that. Yes, next one. Now I want to go back to pulp and talk about the different aspects, if I can remember them. So the concrete experience is about making, and indeed about the question that we experience it. Can you? Yeah, okay, now I remember what I wanted to say. So most of these workshops are project-based, which means there is a goal somewhere and you have to go through there. And what is each student doing? So it's most of the time a very uncontrolled situation, looking from the learning perspective. You experience things, how do you understand it? We don't know. What kind of experience did you have? What did you do? We actually don't really know. So if you want to guide it, that's very important to know that we know that students have certain experience and have certain learning moments. So we have to deal with that as well. Next one. So if you want to control it, I don't know if you really can control what you are experiencing, but we can kind of guide you towards certain things. We can involve testing, like the one that you saw, like you use a structure and you test it till fail, or you look at deformations, you have questions about stability, you can incorporate that in a workshop. If it's about constructing itself, actually the making process will give you, of course, experiences of whether you can make a joint, if it's feasible to make it, or how heavy things are. So in a certain way, we can control you towards certain experiences. And Kolb actually is really talking about the 4 phases where he talks about the role of the tutor. Yes, next one. I took these 2 together because for me it's about linking that experience with a theoretical framework, and it means that in this process, even reflecting on what you've experienced already involves this theoretical framework. Yeah, next one. So in some more specific terms, you could talk about, for example, getting tacit knowledge to explicit knowledge. What is that? It means, for example, you know how to ride a bike, but you don't know how it happens, but you have this tacit knowledge, you know how to do it, but you can get to the level of understanding what is happening, why the bike is not falling over when you ride it. It also refers to the reflection on action by Schön. These are academic relationships, but to go back to the practicality of it, it's talking about having students write reports, and they have to write reports with the theoretical concepts that are behind it so that they can reflect on what is actually happening. We can install reviews. Peer reviews are very interesting because students learn from each other and they learn to express themselves again, so that they have to make knowledge explicit. We can do this tutored by juries. We can provide lectures and more theoretical input like websites or books that need to be read. And in my case, often the workshop is part of a theoretical course, which is interesting because I can prepare the students for the theoretical framework, what are we talking about, and I can use the workshop's results in my classes to bring back the personal experience of students and frame it into this theoretical framework. Yes, next one. Yeah. And then this active experimentation, that's something that the student has to do. We can guide it a bit. Next one. So I think, very simply put, it's important to create a safe space to experiment and to have also this culture, which what does it mean? That you know as a student in this part you have to fail. That's the most important part of what you're doing. You have to experiment and try anew. So don't make the highest tower in cardboard, but try to learn from making it, and hopefully you also fail. And set also up a workshop that requires experimenting, so that it's clear that this kind of process has to take place. Yes, next one. And then the last part, yeah, I'll keep in time, the learning goals in construction workshop. Yes. The QR code is linking to the paper if you would like to see it. With my colleague Ivo Vrouwen and Euke Assissan, a former PhD student of mine, we specifically looked at the construction workshop. That's how I called this workshop of making in relation to structure and construction. The workshop that we've seen today from other speakers is much broader than just structure and construction, so I only looked at that. We went into literature and we talked to 11 tutors who are doing this kind of workshop in one way or the other. We focused on the learning goals and environment, the learning environments, and its evaluation. This is actually, it's called constructive alignment. If you create a course, you want to know what the students are learning, you want to see how they are going to learn that, and then of course you want to make sure that they have learned it. That has to be in line. That's one of the principles that you can find in teaching. Today I will present some learning goals, not too much, but I'll present it in ICSA in a month. The framework that I used for these learning goals, because again, it's really broad, there's a lot to say about that, is also something that is often used: knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values. And I'll talk about it when you see it. Next slide. I won't go into deep of this, but this is the result of talking to the tutors, but also looking into a review and a bit using our knowledge on workshops that we all three shared. What is this part of knowledge? Because you will find, I talked before about tacit knowledge, for example. This is not in here in this word. You will, I think for an engineer as me, it's frustrating. We have the laws of Newton. They are centuries old and they're still there and they're clear. In pedagogics, it's like, okay, it depends on where you start. I could also explain this only with the word knowledge. But so in this case, knowledge is the things that you can't remember and can be explicit about, factual knowledge. And we also included what your body knows. And this can be about the material, that you know what wood is, that it has a certain fiber in a direction. This can be about construction, structure, about technology, and also we heard a lot of people talking about geometry. It has been here also today. And also to understand the expressiveness of a form. And also ecology was something that turned up, sustainability, that turned up a lot. So these are things that you know, you can put in a book and can read about it. The skills are the ones that you need when you're tackling a new problem. When there is something that challenges you, you need to have skills to solve it. It's not solved before, you cannot look it up in books, but you have to develop a skill. And there we found skills on building technology, architectural design, and if you look at collaboration, communication, it was just mentioned by Oliver also, I think. That's not coming from the experiential learning, maybe in a certain way, but not deliberately. That's coming from theories on, for example, collaborative learning, peer learning, but also project-based learning. Those step into skills that you develop to collaborate and to communicate. Also mentioned a lot was the students to learn how to solve problems, but also how to think critically. And also the researching part that has been mentioned here before, the idea of I have something that I don't understand or I want to know more about it. How can I make an experiment and what can I learn from that experiment? So this whole cycle that you saw with the learning is also something acknowledged by tutors as an important learning goal in doing these kind of workshops. Also working in a manual and a digital workspace, being creative in structural design, so not just calculating it, but trying to think about systems when you're designing structures. And also very important that came to the fore is being skilled in regenerative and ecological design. Looking at attitudes and values, I put them together. There were not really specific ones, but it was clear that the tutors had some values that they brought gave to the students, mostly on ecology, for example. So the approach that the tutor has is often transmitted to the students in their stance on how they see the use of materials, for example. Next one. Yeah, can I have the, yeah, okay. Then there were some learning goals that didn't fit in that frame that we thought it was important to take out, and it will resonate probably here, the idea of the real project, so that as a student you learn the full arc from the concept to the actual project delivery, that you are sometimes invested with the client, so they have to deal with the client, that kind of learning. And of course that you have some kind of a real life practice of building. Another group was linking, constructing and designing, which is important, that when you are designing you have to know also how you're going to make it, and it involves the way that you are designing, so it's an interaction. And that leads to often material-centered design, and specifically in this case then for a minimal ecological impact. Another part which is more related to structure theory and structure theory is a link with the practice, leading to a deeper understanding of theoretical concepts and principles, but also in the other way maybe bringing theory and practice application together, so that you can start from understanding of structures and actually make a design out of it, an architectural design, because you understand what structure can mean. Next one. So class, I had some questions there. I can easily, in my view, answer them now. He wanted to know about where do you do them, bachelor, master. Is it something that is short-term, long-term? How about architecture versus engineering students? I think it can be anywhere in the program. As you've seen, it can be small, it can be big. You can do a workshop with 2 tutors with 100 students. The tripod that you saw, I do them with 2 tutors, and we have 100 students, and basically I don't see the students only at the end to give them the feedback in the sense of relating it to the theoretical framework. But sometimes you need 2 tutors for 10 students, so you have to think also about it being something exclusive, which teaching nowadays is less. It depends, of course, on what you want them to learn, and it's important to think about the experiences that you're creating and how to link them with the theoretical framework. So it depends also on what the student already has of a theoretical knowledge, because if they have a good solid basis there, they can do a lot of self-study versus a guided tutoring. You can develop workshops with an analytical approach where you focus on a specific part, like the structure story, or it can be a whole project where you have more things happening and more aspects of design encountering. There was a question about research. I took it as design-driven. Oliver also showed some of them. I think if you think back at the cycle of Cole, it's a similar process of this experiential learning, but I think the main focus is that in this case, with students, you're focusing on having them to get a better understanding of an existing theoretical framework. When you're doing design, you basically focus towards developing the theoretical framework and improving it. So that's the big difference, I think. Yes, next slide. Just to say thank you for listening.
I think that was a very good